Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to our Authors at Google series today. We are pleased to present Dr. Marc Schoen, who's here to talk about his latest book called Your Survival Instinct is Killing You, Retrain Your Brain to Conquer Fear, Make Better Decisions, and Thrive in the 21st Century. The book contains strategies and ideas that show you how to build your instinctual muscles for survival and managing discomfort. Dr. Schoen is an assistant clinical professor of medicine at the UCLA Geffen School of Medicine, where he teaches courses to medical students on performance and decision-making under pressure, as well as hypnosis and medicine. He has extensively studied the area of performance under pressure, particularly as it relates to physical and mental decision-making. His work has been featured extensively on television and radio, and we're happy to have him here today. Please welcome Dr. Schoen.
Good afternoon. One question to start out. What is the one thing that we can do to influence our health, influence our happiness, to influence performance, to influence aging, to influence relationships? What's the one thing? And it's not quitting your job and moving to Tahiti.
Spend more time with our friends and family.
Friends and family. Someone said breathe. You know what it is? The right answer is taming our survival instinct. Yes, could something like our survival instinct be influencing all those different parts of our life? The quick answer is you bet. The survival instinct, we know, is supposed to be about survival, isn't it? It's supposed to help us survive. But in fact, it's putting us in harm's way. Let's talk about it. What is the survival instinct? It's a part of the brain. Many of us know it because it's the part of the brain that clicks on the fight or flight part of us. The part of us that gets mobilized to help us get out of danger. And sometimes we experience it feeling really flushed in the body, right? Rapid heartbeat, quick breathing, the mind getting really obsessive, the body getting tingly, sweating. In other cases, we just feel worked up. But the survival instinct meant to keep us out of danger is now 24/7 on. It was never meant to be on 24/7. It was meant to help us when we are in danger. Real danger, real physical danger, like in the early days running from a spear of an opposing tribe, or running from a saber-toothed tiger. Now, I don't know about you, when I think back, and I think way back, I can't remember last time I was running from a saber-toothed tiger. Most of the time, I'm running from myself. And that's true. Most of our danger today is at our own hands. And yet, it's not real danger, isn't it? Getting cut off on the freeway, having to stand in line, someone hurting our feelings. Are these real situations to evoke this kind of reaction in us? The fact is, it's staying on, and it was never meant to be this chronic, but it is. Now think, for example, have you noticed that when you're more worked up, more revved up, does it affect your performance? Does it affect your ability to make decisions? Or do you notice when you're worked up like this, are you more obsessive? Think about things more, worry more. Generally worry about things that probably will never even happen, right? Or how about sleep? Does it affect our sleep? Do we sleep less, or our sleep is impaired or compromised, unsettled? Do we eat more? Do we drink more? Do we smoke more? Don't answer that question. So we can see it affects us in a profound way. So let's look at what is the chemistry? What is going on that's making this survival instinct happen? The best way to think about it is to look at our different parts of our brain. We actually have 3 parts to our brain, but we're only going to talk about 2. One is a part of the brain that has existed since we broke away from reptiles. And it is called, I call it the limbic brain, and it's the part of the brain that has to do with gut responses, hunger, pain, sleep, fear, anger, pleasure, visceral responses. We have another part of our brain, I call the cerebral brain. It's the logical part of the brain. It's where all the problem solving gets done, the decision making gets done. It's the part that can be thinking about, I better do this time rather than that, or last time this was the result, so I need to do this differently. It's the part that we rely significantly on. And these 2 different parts of the brain are jockeying for position. The cerebral brain, right, wants to control those visceral drives. Visceral gut part of the brain wants full expression of those drives. It wants it right away. So they're at odds. They actually speak 2 different languages. It's almost like if you ever had a tantruming child and you tried to tell the child logically, that's really not a good idea for you to be so upset. Would the child listen? Most likely not. Because the cerebral brain speaks this language trying to be logical to this more emotional brain, it doesn't get it. So they don't always get along. But the survival instinct is housed in this limbic brain. It's a part of the brain that's all about one thing, one goal, to keep us out of danger. And it's absolute. There's no grays. We either are or not in danger. And so now, more than ever before, we as a society are much more revved up. It's taken less to trigger us, isn't it? Have you noticed? Things that might have been inconsequential before in our past are enough to set us off. Why? Why should this be happening? I mean, don't we live in a society filled with all sorts of wonderful technological comforts and advances? Don't we? But guess what? As we are filled with all these advances to make our lives so much more comfortable, we have become less tolerant of being uncomfortable. Our comfort zone has shrunken. And the result of it shrinking is that we're feeling uncomfortable a lot more often. And what's the significance of that? Huge. Because this survival instinct, the part of us that's supposed to keep us out of danger, when it feels uncomfortable, it senses that we're uncomfortable inside. It doesn't think about, you're just because you're standing in a line or you're stuck in traffic. No, it thinks one thing. It thinks I'm in danger. So now, the more uncomfortable we are in our lives, the more this signal is going off saying we're in danger. And when that happens, it clicks on this survival instinct, it stays on, goes into overdrive, and we become maxed out. And what are the results? What are the results of this? Huge. Depression, anxiety, inability to sleep, pain. They're just going through the roof. Now, isn't this odd that this should be happening? We are living in a society with tremendous amount of resources for our health. Not only medicine, but research that we can read, people giving us tools, self-help. It's everywhere. But why are all these symptoms getting worse? We are missing something. We're missing something. Something has to be done differently. And so we're talking about feeling uncomfortable. So a key part of this, again, is that when we're uncomfortable, it signals danger to the brain. And then it turns on the survival instinct, and we are revved up and worked up and react. Now, you might think, is that really that significant? Is it not a problem that we're more revved up? Think of it. Think of it this way, that what we're basically running on long term is leaded fuel, running coal. We're not running cleanly. And believe me, this is why we are seeing symptoms like this shoot through the roof. And it's not just in adults, it's not just young adults. I'm now seeing this in kids as young as 8 years old, and I never saw that happen 30 years ago. The symptoms I'm seeing in kids like migraines, horrible stomach problems, inability to take exams, panic attacks, this didn't happen in 8-year-olds 30 years ago. It happened in young adults. So it's filtered all the way down through society. So what is it? What is one of the factors that's influencing this? I call it adjutants. Adjutants to me is how sped up we are, how activated we are, how hot we're running inside. It's sort of like an internal thermostat, using this metaphorically. And so that as we get more sped up, the temperature rises. We're all accustomed to being 98.6, right? That's the norm. Those who are meditators probably have a lower body temperature. I've been doing hypnosis since I've been 13. Mine's about 96s. So we have this temperature. And the higher that we get revved up, the higher levels of adjutants, the hotter we get. Now, it gets to a certain point. When this speed gets high enough, it crosses what I call a discomfort threshold. And as it speeds up, goes up, it crosses that threshold. We feel uncomfortable, clicks on the survival instinct. Now, it's really important to think of this adjutants. It's not like stress, which is bad. We think of negative. Adjutants can even be a good thing. First symptoms I ever got from stress in my life was when I was 36, and I was loving it. I was loving what I was doing, running 2 cutting-edge programs, one on how the mind affects the body. I was loving what I was doing, but I started getting symptoms. So this adjutants isn't just bad things. It can be good things. That's why it's different than stress. Stress is something very discrete, a conflict with a boss or a coworker, or having to meet a certain deadline. This adjutants is just this generalized speed in the body. So what affects it? What affects adjutants then? Well, one is our constant need for sensory stimulation. We all know about that, don't we? How many of us just sit and read a book? How many of us just talk to a person? Most of us are engaging in a flood of stimulation. Like I was at a Laker game a few years ago when they were actually winning. And it was a playoff game. The tickets cost hundreds of dollars. And I decide I'm looking around the audience while the game is going on. And like everywhere I can see, people are on their phones, texting. No one's paying attention to the game. It wasn't enough stimulation. And we have become accustomed to needing lots of stimulation. We don't want to just talk to someone. We want to talk to someone. We want to watch something. We want to eat at the same time. We want to play with our phones. We have become addicted to stimulation. We have. And you know what? It has a physiological effect. It's related to dopamine in the brain, which is a neurotransmitter. It's a biochemical that affects mood. And the more the stimulation we get, the more we become addicted to this dopamine surge. And after a while, the stimulation stops producing as much dopamine, and we got to do more stimulation to get back to it. The next area is what I call instant gratification, the need for something now. If we're hungry, we want to eat, don't we? We don't want to wait. Hey, if we need an answer and we're uncertain, where do we go? You guys only get one choice in this place. Pass or fail on this one. Where do you go if you're uncertain about something? Google. Yes. That's the pitch for Google. But so we've learned to not live with uncertainty. When I was writing my dissertation and looking to find resources to supply in my dissertation, I had to go up and down these stacks of the library looking for something. And of course, I'd get to the upper stacks where I knew that this would be the article that would be just the one I needed. And of course, I'd get there, and it would be gone. It wouldn't be there. So I'd have to wait days to get it. We don't do that anymore, do we? We want it right away. And that leads to the other thing that influences adjutants. We've become impatient, haven't we? We get really irritated if we have to stand in line. If we have to ask the same question twice, we have to send the same email twice. We want an email response quickly, don't we? We want a text message quickly. Who wants to wait? And what about perfection? We have become a culture that wants perfection. Why? Because the computer model, everything's perfect, isn't it? Everything lines up. You either get it right, you get it wrong. But the problem is, the world doesn't line up perfectly. And so we take this scheme in which we're all working and apply it to the real world. It creates disastrous results in our relationships because the world seldom produces exactly what we expect. All these factors of adjutants pump up our level of discomfort. They really do. They cross that discomfort threshold, and we start getting worked up, so it requires a very little provocation to set us off. Very, very little. But let's talk about some specific things, how this really happens. Let's take performance and decision-making under pressure. Happens to be one of my great interests. It's a class that I teach at UCLA in the medical school where we take students and groom them through these series of exercises and trainings so that when they're under pressure, they perform at their absolute best. So what is it about pressure that's important? Pressure is experienced by the brain as uncomfortable. And what's most of our experiences of pressure and performance? It began when we were young, right? Oral presentations, playing school sports, and learning like, oh my God, I have to do well this next time, or when I get up and do an oral presentation, I don't want to embarrass myself or forget what I'm supposed to say. And most of us have had some bad experiences, and those bad experiences prejudice us in the present. So what happens now when we're under pressure, it has all those old associations of flopping, being embarrassed, being rejected. So now, when we're under pressure now, we want to change that. But look what happens. When the pressure goes up, we get uncomfortable, the survival instinct goes on. Here's what happens mechanically. When the survival instinct goes on, it diverts the blood supply, the oxygen, away from that cerebral part of our brain. That's the part of the brain where the decision-making is, the problem-solving is. So it just diverts the blood away, turns on the fight or flight, and since the cerebral brain processes information so much slower than the limbic brain, it can't stop it. How many people have noticed this? Has this ever happened to you when you felt your heart beating, or all of a sudden you felt worked up and you weren't sure why? And then you had to think about it. Why am I upset? That's because the limbic brain is quicker. It's faster, but it had to be, right? If someone was throwing a spear at us, would we want to sit back and think, should I hang out? or should I run? We didn't want to do that. So we needed to process information instantaneously when we were in danger. So this limbic brain has priority. So when that does it takes the blood supply away from the cerebral brain where the problem solving happens, and the result is it just doesn't have enough juice to run the machinery. It's kind of like an electrical power grid. An electrical power grid that gets overtapped. And there isn't enough energy to go around, so lights start going out all over the place, and one of those lights is in this problem-solving area. And when it happens, what happens to our decisions? They become defensive in nature. In other words, we're more concerned about limiting our losses than we are about advancing our gains. And even we have situations in front of us. We will perceive negative outcomes even when a positive outcome might be more likely. So as you can see, our performance is dramatically affected. But think about this. You all probably work tons of hours, and you're giving a lot of demands that you have to meet. And the younger generation has had much more of this, jumping through hoops. And you have to learn more. But who teaches you how to execute that knowledge? Who teaches you how to take that knowledge and make it happen under extreme conditions? I never got that training. I remember playing sports and I used to pitch. I used to remember thinking, like, all this practice, I just hope that God, when I get in the game, I can get the ball over the plate. It was like total random. No one teaches us how to perform under pressure. And to me, that's equally as important as the information. But it's not being done. Just think, if we could learn how to perform under pressure, what kind of edge that would get us. When I wrote my book, I interviewed different people who were big in business and who did well under pressure. And you know what they told me? They told me this. They said, you know what? Because I can do well under fire, I have an edge over my competition who folds and unravels under pressure. And they said that they particularly like dealing with the younger generation because they're even less trained in dealing with pressure and being under fire. So this is something we need to do. This is something that is part of my training, is teaching people how to do that, how to teach companies, employees, executives, students to be able to do that. So important. But the good news, very important, is that this is something we can learn. This is something you can be trained to do. No doubt some people are better at it, but it doesn't mean that the rest of us can't improve significantly, for sure. Now, the other area of my studying and research is in the area of health. What is the effect of this survival instinct on our health? It's huge. When we are running at this higher speed, what it does, when it creates the fear, it triggers a process called inflammation. How many people have heard of inflammation? Small portion. Inflammation is perhaps the leading theory of aging, disease, health. Inflammation is intended for a good thing. It's to basically beef up the immune soldiers of the body so they can fight infection. But what happens is when we're under stress, fear, anger, we beef up more immune soldiers than what we need. What's the effect? It's the effect of having a bunch of Marines, brigade in the bleachers all drinking beer. What's the end result? A fight. A fight's going to happen. And where does that fight happen? It happens within us. And these immune soldiers, instead of fighting pathogens, they start chewing on and chomping on our organs. and we age a lot faster. We can control inflammation. It's one of my earlier things that I've done. In fact, I even just published a study showing that we can change that inflammatory response in the body in a simple way. Okay, so if it can have this profound effect on performance, decision-making, on health, relationships, what do we do to improve things? Now, you could say to me, hey, you know what? This adjutant stuff is here to stay. And you might be right. Maybe we all have to just get accustomed to running a lot faster. Maybe all this stimulation is not going to change. Maybe instant gratification is not going to change. Perfection. You may say that. And you may be arguably right on that point. So if that's not going to change and we're all going to be running a lot faster, that means we're going to all be a lot more uncomfortable, doesn't it? So then we have one choice, don't we? One choice. The choice is to retrain our instincts to being uncomfortable. To make it so that when we're uncomfortable, it does not mean danger. Think we can do it? Can we retrain our instincts? Yes, we can. We most definitely can. A moment ago, I referred to a study that just got published, took people who reacted with this kind of adjutants and discomfort and stress, and seeing if we can recondition it so that when they're under stress, they don't physically react to it. By taking blood measures, I was able to show that, in fact, we can do that. So, okay, so then what do we do? First goal is this. We accept that we're not trying to banish discomfort. We're not trying to get rid of it. Because you know what? It's not going away. It's here to stay. But many people believe that the goal is to get rid of it. And contemporary thought, in terms of managing stress, what is it about? Trying to stop stress, isn't it? Trying to not feel it, to distract ourselves from it. But what happens? That which we avoid becomes what? Bigger, becomes larger, becomes more of a threat, doesn't it? So many times our attempts to control stress, fear, is making us more vulnerable. We don't want to do that. We want to change the brain's reaction to being uncomfortable. And a sophisticated way to do it, based on the newest data, is literally to train the brain so when we're doing something frightening, uncomfortable, instead of it going straight to the fear center, like a one-lane road to the fear center, we want to make it take roads to different parts of the brain that have no association, no connection to fear. And by doing that, we dilute the power of that fear center. It's very elaborate, sophisticated, and fascinating reading, and something everyone can learn to do. But since we don't have enough time to go into that, and you can certainly dive into that at a later time, my writings, but I would like to talk about some things before I stop that you can do. One, if you want to try lowering the adjutants levels, think about what I call chilling out before bedtime. Yeah, most people go high gear, right? All the way up to bedtime, boom, switch gears, say, okay, it's time to go to sleep. But sleep is not the same as relaxation. And so even though we may fall asleep, we're still tense and worked up on the inside. If you chill out before bedtime, it has an enormous effect on physical symptoms the next day, like grinding your teeth, headaches, stomach aches, other types of aches, your mood. important. Or take a technological timeout. Oh, I just realized it's not the place to say that, is that? But I guess I've made the mistake, so I probably won't be asked again to come back. But it's true. We need to take some more breaks from technology, to particularly before bedtime. An hour, 2 hours before bedtime makes a huge difference. Now, let's just say you wanted to improve your discomfort muscle so you could handle more discomfort than you do now. Build up that muscle that's atrophying. What can you do? One of the ones that I like is called expanding your comfort zone. For some, that may be, taking a new route to work. It may mean not using Google Maps to get there, or maybe using Apple Maps. We want to do something that challenges us, particularly something that may be uncomfortable. Doing something that we might have failed at before or not succeeded. I like to tell people to go out, take an acting class, do an improv class, sing, do these kind of presentations. Put yourself in the position where you're uncomfortable and where you can survive. Very, very important. I am getting the signal that it's time to stop talking. But the bottom line I want you to keep in mind here is that these are all things that we can learn. This is not something that's not obtainable. True, some people are better at it than others. But the fact is, we can all learn it. There's data that show we can learn it and get a lot better at it. And so rather than being something to avoid and fear being uncomfortable, it's something that you can embrace and find, in fact, that it can facilitate performance rather than be an obstacle. Thank you. And if there are any questions.
Hi, I was wondering, is this adjutants concept that you talk about, is this something that you can actually measure? Like, do we have biochemical markers for it or anything like that?
Yeah, the way you would really measure it is look at some psychophysiological measures. You would look at body heat. You would look at respiration levels, the breathing. You'd look at heartbeat. You could measure tension in the body. You can use electrodes on, particularly the forehead. And you can also look at brain rhythms, which would be more rapid than slow.
So that sounds like it's at least slightly complicated. But I guess my follow-on question was going to be, is this something that we could do a longitudinal study on and say, is this actually getting worse over time? Are we more amped up now than we used to be?
Absolutely.
Or
we are
less?
so much more amped up than we used to. And that's why I was giving the example of why should 8-year-olds be having these problems of blocking on exams? Why should they be having headaches, stomach aches? Because now at an early age, everyone's under more pressure. I remember when my kids were younger, they're having to do a couple hours of homework a night when they were 7. That's ridiculous. And so because we're so much more amped up and there's so much more sensory stimulation and we're so much more about instant gratification, it is just skyrocketing. So yes, it is much worse than it ever used to be.
The thought I had is I recently read Jared Diamond's latest book, and he talks about how traditional societies, like what they're like, how they deal with their problems. And the thought that came to me is that I'm not entirely convinced that this agitation factor is what's increasing, because reading about these other societies, they sound terribly agitated all the time. Like they're worried about people stabbing them, they're worried about their friends murdering them, starving to death, all these typical problems that, we have other agitators, but humanity has persistently dealt with agitators all the time and at a very high level at all the time. But what I imagine is the reason kids these days are having these problems that you mentioned is that we're not dealing with them with social mechanisms that these other societies have adopted. What kind of social interactions that would you think would help when dealing with each other? Because you suggested go do something that agitates you. Take an acting class. But just doing that is good, but what do you do after you're done at the acting class and you're still agitated? You have to get some sort of social interaction to relieve that agitation, to learn that you're okay, and build up that muscle that says, bad things happen, then you're okay.
Great question, excellent question. And because I've had limited time, I couldn't expand on it. But you're absolutely right. The goal isn't just to create agitation. The goal is to change how we label, how we experience that agitation. There's actually a part in the brain that straddles the old and new brain, and its job is to interpret our physical experience inside. Because the physiology of being stressed out and fearful is not necessarily different than the physiology of being happy and excited. But there's a part of the brain that interprets that physiology as bad or as okay or good. So what we want to do is train ourselves that this type of discomfort actually is beneficial. Now, the elaborate way in my writings, I show that what we can do is take this kind of agitation and recondition the brain to react differently. And one way actually is to use a social component. One very fascinating way, which I use in my classes, is to take this, create an agitation, create a stress, but do it in a group of people. So now, first of all, there's pressure to perform in a group of people. And it creates a vulnerability because you know you're going to either fail or succeed in your peers. But the group process actually stimulates our hormones in the body. A thing called oxytocin, you've probably heard of it. It's this good feeling hormone. And so what happens is, it happens to both men and women, is that now they're in a vulnerable situation, feeling pressure in this group situation, which creates a bonding. These hormones are released in the body, and so now it gets associated in the brain with a warmer, positive, connected feeling. So we're teaching you that a vulnerability, a transparency, rather than a perfection, being uptight, being angry, being fearful, that a transparency, a vulnerability actually creates a good feeling. That's how we start doing it. Great question.
We all know stress is bad, but can we ignore the fact that stress is also the main reason for our motivation to do something? If we suppress our stress, are we going to be more passive?
Now, I want to make sure I got the question. The question is that we use stress to ignite us as a catalyst?
Yes.
And then if we take it away, the question was?
Are we going to be more passive?
The goal is not to take away stress. The goal isn't to take away being uncomfortable. It's never going to happen because the world isn't perfect. It never lines up, or if it does line up perfectly, how long does it last? It's transitory. So most of the time the world doesn't line up perfectly, and so we really need to be effective at dealing with a world that's constantly changing and not perfect. So no, the goal isn't to banish stress or discomfort. The goal is, okay, if discomfort is here to stay, we got to manage it well. And if we manage it well, it facilitates performance. It doesn't lead to an apathy at all.
I'm wondering if meditation help, and what kind of meditation will help?
Yes, the question is about meditation. You know, meditation is wonderful. There's plenty of research on meditation having a very healthful effect on the brain, on the body. One of the things that meditation can do, mindful meditation is the one I'm most familiar with, is that it creates a better balance between this emotional limbic brain and the cerebral brain. So it brings them into better balance. The problem, what happens is as we become uncomfortable or experience trauma, it destabilizes the brain. So that often this limbic emotional brain is the one that has hold of the steering wheel. And it's the one driving the car. But meditation and the one I believe a lot in is hypnosis, can bring both these parts of the brain back into a balanced state. So, but mindful meditation is the one that has the most data on it.
You know, beyond behavioral therapy like CBT or DBT, is there other stuff from psychology that can be used to, I guess, attenuate the adjutants?
Yes. I believe that where this field is going, that I believe that this is the future. The future is we're not just going to be sitting around talking and trying to come up with strategies and cognitive and intellectual ways of doing something or taking a bunch of deep breaths. I think where it's really going is how can we take specific parts of the brain and change how those brain's parts fire. That's what we want to do. And I think to look around for treatments that actually focus directly on the fear center. And, oh, and incidentally, I should tell you this, I forgot to mention, if any of you are interested in a certain breath technique I developed for this approach, for my approaches, it's not set up on my website yet, but if you wanted to email me, I'm happy to send it to you free of charge, of course. My email is my name, Marc Schoen, PhD, @gmail.com, and just put in the subject line, breath technique, and I'll send it to you. But so going back to your question of what kind of approaches, I would suggest look for these newer approaches that really target these specific areas of the brain. I think it's just quicker, more direct, and ultimately more powerful and more enduring. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your interest.